On this episode of Mothman in the Bible Belt, famed ghost hunter and documentarian Barry Conrad discusses the San Pedro Haunting, the 1955 Kelly Hopkinsville extraterrestrial encounter, and the TV show he co-created, My Ghost Story. Conrad dishes on his documentaries, Legend of the Flatwoods Monster and California's Most Haunted, and being eyed for ghost hunters. He also chimes in on the status of a Mothman documentary he's been working on for the past 20 plus years. Coming up next.
Welcome to the Mothman in the Bible Belt podcast with your host, Buck Fantastic.
Girl Scout cookies.
Ghost hunter Barry Conrad is an award-winning cinematographer and documentarian hailing from Fairfield, Ohio. He co-created the TV show My Ghost Story and directed and produced several documentaries on ghosts and extraterrestrials, including California's Most Haunted and An Unknown Encounter, a true account of the San Pedro Haunting, both of which are currently streaming for free on Tubi. Conrad is the owner of California-based broadcast video production company, Barcon Video Productions. Join me, your host, Buck Fantastic, for another exciting episode of Mothman the Bible Belt. It's a collective chit-chat of otherworldly origins. Barry, welcome to Mothman of the Bible Belt. How are you doing this evening?
Good. It's good to be here finally. Absolutely.
You've been investigating ghosts for over 40 years. What got you interested?
Wow. You know what? I grew up in Ohio, and I remember that when I was a kid, there was this. I grew up on a farm in southern Ohio near Cincinnati. It's actually a little town called Fairfield near Hamilton, and there was an old house owned by the Huber family, and they had moved out years before and built another little house next door. And if you can think of the epitome of what a haunted house should look like, you know, it's just a very old, dilapidated place, but it was all sealed up. But you could look through the front windows. That's what it looked like. Very Gothic looking. Must have been over 100 years old. And my cousin, Dale, and I walked up there one time. We're just kind of curious, up onto the front porch, and it was still light. It was like close to sunset. And we walked up onto the front porch, and I remember the floorboards in the front porch were so old that you could, if you put too much weight on one of them, it could go right through the floor. You know, it was that old. And I remember we looked through the front window, and there was an old rustic staircase that went up, and there was light coming in from the side window. And we thought we both saw at the same time a lady in white, shimmery white, just kind of floating down the stairs. And we didn't look more than a couple seconds, and we were out of there. And that's kind of what got my interest. And one other thing I'll tell you too, but one of the things that are rather interesting too, that even another thing that spurred my interest, looked like I was almost meant to be for me to get into this line of work. I remember going to a grocery store about 1961. You know, I was only like 10 then. And it was my mother, and I got out, I found a $10 bill on the curb there. And I remember she grabbed that out of my hand, you know, she's thinking, oh, grocery money, right? And I said, hey, don't I get something for that $10? So she went in, she bought me a comic book. I used to have the comic books on those rotating racks, you know. Mm-hmm. And she had she said, why don't you figure out which comic book you want? Anything sounded great. So I had her get a 25-cent kind of giant comic book. It was a series of comics about different things in the world. Could be scuba diving, archaeology, all kinds of things. And it was called The World Around Us. I still have the comic book. And there was one called Ghosts, The World of Ghosts. And I remember reading the first story in that comic book was about hitchhiking ghosts. Resurrection Mary, the ghost that appears to hitchhike around Chicago at Resurrection Cemetery and gets into your car. And I was just fascinated because it said these were allegedly true stories. And that is what kind of sparked my interest in ghosts originally as a kid.
You've been a news photog, directed several documentaries, worked on other people's film and television projects. What nudged you to start your own production company, Barcon?
Yeah. Well, actually, I started out as a news cameraman in Cincinnati at WKRC. Used to work with George Clooney's father, used to be the anchorman there. I worked with him and a number of other reporters. And then I eventually got an offer to go to Denver from one of the producers that worked there. He went to Denver. They needed a film camera guy. So I went there. And I worked for several others. I worked with NBC there as well, and KWGN, which is an independent station. And I always kind of wanted to go to Los Angeles. I decided to make the move to LA because I wanted to get into more production work. And I came out to LA in 1986, and it was a little bit rough because you come into a new area, you really have to make some connections. And I was able to do that, just some simple projects for people at a company called Canyon Video. And so my stepfather was interested in this kind of business. The camera work kind of intrigued him, and he actually fronted me some money at the time to buy some basic equipment. And I got my first TV camera. It was an Ikigami, and it was a 3/4 inch camera. Now that was before we had these single system cameras. Everything was contained in one camera. What I mean by it being this was like a double system. You actually had a camera on your shoulder. It was fairly big. Got the lens, the zoom lens, and you have an umbilical cable running into a deck. That was a deck you put over your shoulders, and we were running what we call 3/4 inch. So that is kind of, how I got started. And I met a lot of great people out here. One of my good friends I met out here through another friend was Jackie Earl Haley, and he was an actor. Was in like the Bad News Bears. He went on to do Rorschach and The Watchmen, and he played Freddy Krueger. Yeah, in one of the movies, right? Exactly. And then eventually, he worked with me. I did a cop show called Real Stories of the Highway Patrol. I shot over 600 episodes, and Jackie actually did audio for part of that. But I had another guy that did it more regular. His name was Kai Wagner, great audio guy. And so I was out in the field, filming the police, every move they made. You go out and every stop they make, you just roll on it. And they tested me out at first. I was a little nervous because someone said, "Oh, they need a camera guy." And I think the first weekend I went out, I got a high-speed pursuit or something like that. And that's what got me really into that. I mean, but my news background really was helpful because I had experience going out, running and gunning and getting shots, off the camera and stuff like that. And I liked telling stories as well. My background was as a writer too. I was a journalist. I graduated from Miami University, not in Florida, but in Oxford, Ohio, with a Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism. And I interviewed a number of celebrities back in Ohio. And I think one of the real treats which really got me interested in Hollywood was it was in 1971. I actually got an interview there's a lady was bringing this gentleman in to give a talk. It was the Montgomery Women's Club. Her name was Mrs. Davis Roll. I never forgot her name. And I saw in the paper where, in the regular Cincinnati Enquirer newspaper, that they were going to bring one of the stars of The Wizard of Oz. You remember The Wizard of Oz? Mm-hmm. He was Ray Bolger. He played the Scarecrow. And I thought, wow, it's one of my favorite films. Wow, wouldn't it be great if I could get an interview? So I called her up. And next thing I know, she had Ray Bolger call me on the phone and said, "Oh, if you come down to my talk, I'm going to give a talk tomorrow. And I'll have 10 minutes. I don't know." And so I went down and saw his talk. It was fantastic. And he gets done with the talk. Now here I'm thinking 10 minutes, right? And so he came up to me. He was a really sweet guy. She was with him, Mrs. Roll. And he said to me, "I want to tell you all about The Wizard of Oz and for your article that you want to write." And he says, "How about we go to lunch?" So we got into his limo, went to lunch for an hour and a half, something like that. And I had an audio recorder, and I put out a DVD with that audio recording not too long ago from way, way back. And that was it was great hearing those kind of stories. It really fascinated me, the old Hollywood stuff. But being in LA, I was in the right place. And later on, I did meet a lot of people being in the business. I worked with a lot of agencies. Eventually, I worked with a lot of agencies, and they would send me out all kinds of different projects and things, behind the scenes, all kinds of things. I worked on a few films. In fact, in 1986, when I first came out here, one of the first film projects that I worked on was with Karen Black and a lady, I'm trying to think of her name now. She was in Elizabeth Berkley. She started doing a show right after we worked with her called Saved by the Bell, I think it was called. I think she played Jessie on that show.
And she was in Showgirls.
Showgirls, right. I forgot about that, right. And I think that's like one of the first things she did. We were working on the back lot of Disney Studios. It was a independent film called Platinum Blonde. I don't know if it's still out there or where. You might be able to find a copy somewhere. But Karen Black, who's since passed away, was great to work with. And a fellow who used to be in Alan Young. He was in a show called Mr. Ed, the Talking Horse.
He was the voice of Scrooge McDuck.
I didn't know that. I didn't know. He was really a cool guy. And I didn't get a chance to really know him very well, but he was just great to work with. And that's kind of how I started that whole Hollywood career thing. And I tried to remain independent. So I called my company Barcon, like Barry Conrad, BARCON, Barcon Productions. And incidentally, when I'm working on Platinum Blonde, I meet a photographer. We struck up a friendship, and his name is Jeff Wheatcraft. And he was doing still photography behind the scenes, documenting the production. And Zoli Vidor was the director of photography, and I think he's since passed. I know his son was doing films. And so he was getting a lot of shots. They wanted a lot of shots of Zoli behind the camera and Karen Black and all this stuff. And so I think Jeff also had like a little walk-on part, a scene in an art shop or something like that. But that's how we met. And of course, if you recognize that name, Jeff Wheatcraft,
The Jackie Hernandez San Pedro Haunting.
Yeah, that's how I met him. And a lot of people don't know that, but that's how I met Jeff. We became friends. And by the way, on the subject of ghosts, Jeff was an extreme skeptic, a non-believer. He didn't believe in any of this stuff. And then that's how that relationship started, his friendship started. And of course, in 1989, I'd only been out here 3 years. I got a call from a friend of mine named Dr. Taft. I had worked from as I mentioned, my earlier interest in ghosts, like from the comic book and the old house that we went up to. I met him through a friend. I met some lady because I liked that movie, The Entity. And she said, "Oh, I know one of the guys who investigated that." And it was Carrie Gaynor and Barry Taft. But she knew Barry Taft directly. And I guess she gave me his number and I called him. And that's kind of how that relationship started. We started talking about ghosts. And then he invited me out on cases. We went out a lot, and we went on a lot of cases, but I would film everything. My whole intention was, okay, if ghosts are real, and I'm very open-minded. I've always been open-minded. I said, I want to document it. I want to get it on camera to get some kind of, physical proof or visual proof of ghosts. That's kind of how that whole thing started. And in '89, he had a call from a young woman. She had some problems in her relationship with her husband, Al. Her name was Jackie Hernandez, and she was a single mother. She had a little baby daughter, Samantha, and a 3-year-old boy, Jamie. And she was living alone in a little bungalow down in San Pedro. And we all, I say all, it was Dr. Taft, myself, and I asked Jeff Wheatcraft to go. I said, bring your still camera. I have video. I didn't bring it out of the truck yet. And there were some other people when we got to the house. There was a couple friends of Barry Taft, a couple of his friends, like maybe a girlfriend he was dating at the time. And we talked to her, and she told us this remarkable, scary story about seeing an apparition of an old man that sat cross-legged, wearing a red flannel shirt, and he would sit there looking very desiccated, looked very almost like corpse-like, and he would appear sitting in the baby's bedroom, children's bedroom, on the lower bunk bed. And then one other time, a friend of hers said, "Oh, we found some money in our attic." And so the wheels started grinding. "Oh, maybe I'll find money in my attic." So she decides to take a peek up in her attic. In order to get up there, he has to stand on top of a washing machine and put like an apple box or a milk crate on top of her to peer in. She peered in up there, and lo and behold, she claimed she had seen a disembodied head, unlike the old man corpse-like figure, but this was more corpulent, like heavy set features. I think of like Alfred Hitchcock, kind of with jowls, that kind of a look. And so she told us the story, and it kind of floated towards her, and she screamed and jumped down out of there, and she was afraid to ever look back up there again. So that is how that story started. That's how that started.
Did she have anything strange or peculiar happen before she moved into that bungalow?
No. She had no paranormal experience whatsoever before that. None whatsoever. We asked her that. And it was only after she had moved into the house. She claimed, I think, that almost like the first day or two she's in the house, she felt like a presence in the house, like something watching you, but you really don't see what it is. Or sometimes she thinks she sees like a shadow form out of the corner of her eye, something like that in passing. But she said she had no, that I can recall, no paranormal experience before that time.
Barry Taft wrote in his book that the phenomena followed Jeff Wheatcraft. Is that true?
Well, it did. It really followed me. Okay, it followed her first.
Mm-hmm.
She moved out of the house after this one incident we'll talk about that happened on September 4th in a minute. Followed her to another home. She got out of that house after this very traumatic incident happened with Jeff, and she moved almost, oh gosh, it was a couple 100 miles up north to a mobile home in Weldon. I think she got temporarily back together with her ex-husband, and he got her up there because he used to go fishing up there. He liked the rural countryside. It was a real beautiful area. It's called Weldon, not too far from Bakersfield. Trying to think, it's not too far from the Mojave Desert, too, Mojave, and it followed her up there, and we did have other things happen up there, but after she left there, because like I say, more activity we'll describe in a minute happened up there. She moved back to San Pedro to a different place, an apartment. And again, I was following the case with a camera. And during the summer of 1990, this case was very expansive. It went into 90. July 1990, it started appearing at my apartment. I had an apartment back then in Studio City on Tujunga Avenue. And it would do things like, I don't remember like hearing a voice or anything like that, but they would turn on the gas stove, had the burners. It would always turn on the right front burners. Now, a lot of times these things would be witnessed by Jeff, because Jeff was working with me at that time. He was doing audio and helping with lighting and stuff like that on projects. So yeah, it followed me first. And then at some point, Jeff also had a couple incidents, and also Gary Bame, who is an integral part of our team. He was a friend of mine from Ohio. We went to high school together. He was living out here then. He was skeptical too, really, until that incident from September 4th, as we'll talk about in a second. And he was with me a lot of times, but it was there in the apartment. Not every night. It would happen. It was a hit and run ghost. It would come. It would turn on burners. One night it shattered the windows. And I remember we had I was like overnight, I was asleep, and it woke me up. We had to do an early call the next morning, working somewhere with Jeff, and Jeff and I came back, and he saw the mess, of the window. I told him about the window, and it left this particular triangular, very sharp, where the apex was, had like a sharp point of glass, like a triangular dagger thing. And it was looked like very scary. You could almost stab somebody with that piece of glass. We swept up the glass. We took the pieces out to the dumpster, put it in a garbage bag, took it out to the dumpster. And at that time, before we had as many computers as we have now, obviously, I had an old electric typewriter sitting in the kitchen on a little stand. After we dumped the glass in that bag out in the back dumpster, shut the lid, we walked back into the apartment. That particular shard of glass was sitting on the top row keys of the typewriter, and we went out and checked. The bag was in the garbage dumpster, but it hadn't been opened. It's almost like they call that a port. It took that shard of glass and dematerialized it or ported it into the apartment. So that was amazing. But yeah, it followed me mainly. Jeff, I'm sorry, Jackie mainly. But me, probably because I was trying to document it. And of course, it would also attack Jeff in my apartment several times. But
Did you see an apparition in your apartment or things happening or occurring?
you know what? It would, Buck, there was a lot of things moved around. It would, if you walked out of one room, it would do something in another room, like put a flashlight on the floor and have turn it on, things like that. It was always like playing these games. As far as an apparition, now I never saw an apparition on December 4th, 1990. We had all been doing a Christmas party, Jeff, Gary, and I. We came back to the apartment again, December 4th, 1990. And there was like a Pepsi can sitting on the floor. We walked in. We thought, that's weird. It's something out of place like that. And then things started happening, like like we said, the stove burner would be on, and you turn it off, and you walk out of it, and it would be back on. And at one point, it actually threw a box of 22 caliber bullets onto the stove. Fortunately, the stove was not on, but it actually threw bullets. Those are I had a rifle at that time for protection. Then I kept the bullets in a drawer in my bedroom, so it ported them out of there. But now, when you ask about apparition, I never saw anything like that. But Jeff and Gary saw something. I think I might have been in the other room, like in the bedroom, but they were in the kitchen area, looking towards the living room, and they both started yelling, oh my gosh, look at that!" By the time I got in there, it had dissipated. It was like a black mass looked like a form of a person, like a shadow person, and it formed for just an instant, and it shot through the wall into the bedroom. But I had left the bedroom. Maybe it showed up after that, or maybe it didn't show up at all.
Jackie saw a black mass in her place, right?
I think so, yeah. And well, Jeff saw, the first night when we went into that house, August 8th, 89. That was the catalyst night. That's the night that, again, skeptical Jeff would have an experience. And he did, he had a camera. He went up and took some pictures, because I said, why don't you go up and take a few pictures? Because maybe you will see something. I hadn't even brought the video equipment in. So he goes up, he's taking a few pictures. He comes back down. He goes, oh, didn't see anything. I'm hearing all these stories about ghosts. Maybe it's psychologically affecting me, because I felt like there's something watching me from behind. He said, I think it's psychological. So I think one of our other guy, Larry Brooks, who's a friend of Taft's, he goes, hey, why don't you go back up and take some pictures over your shoulder, like your right shoulder. Maybe you'll get a picture of the ghost. So he kind of scoffed at that at first, but then he thought, oh, why not? So he goes back up into the attic, and it's just right above the crawl space opening. There was a little laundry room below. And he went up. We're down below. Again, I had not brought video equipment in. And he was taking pictures following Larry's advice. He's into the third shot like this, shooting over his right shoulder, thinking maybe I'll catch something. As he squeezed off the shutter, that's when we all hear it from down below. We hear, oh, like this, like he's like bolts, and he comes down. And he told us that something had pulled the camera out of his hands. And we were amazed. And in my video, I went up with video, and it did not work up there until I came back down. And then I asked him, he comes down. I'm looking up. He comes down next. He's coming down. His whole body's shaking. And I say, he wouldn't talk to me. I said, what's going on? He wouldn't say anything until he got down. And he says, I said, what happened? It looked like you were disturbed by something. And he goes, yeah. He says, he was like all out of breath. And I think my camera came back on, and I think I filmed this. It came on when I came down out of the attic, and I had the deck on my shoulder, and I was recording. And he goes, I couldn't talk. I dare not say anything, because as I'm exiting the attic crawl space, as he's coming down, he felt what he felt like to be a large bony hand pressing slowly into his back. And indeed, he had internal bruising. He had to go to see a chiropractor after that. And then when you mentioned the black mass, he was pretty good on me. As scared as he was very curious now. This didn't fit in with his idea of reality. He wants to find out more. So he did look back up there. We heard some scratching sounds and some footsteps. I think I recorded some of that. And then he goes and looks back up there, and I put some spill light from underneath. There was also a bare bulb that we could turn on with a chain, so he could see a little bit into the attic, because we had already pulled up. We did have a light up there earlier just to see, and there was nobody up there that could have pulled the camera out of his hand. Nobody physical, at least. And he saw a large black mass. He did, and it was moving back and forth. He said it was like if you put 3 human beings in underneath like a black sheet. It was dark, but it was like moving slowly back and forth. It didn't make any sound. And then that's what he saw. And then he jumped down out of there, and I don't know whatever happened with that, but I think it probably dissipated probably quickly. But that night, August 8th, 89, it was like walking into a hornet's nest, because here's a guy, Jeff, who's a very rational guy, very intelligent guy, very, very smart guy, who had no belief whatsoever in the supernatural at all. In fact, when after Jackie had told us, she was telling our group the stories about some of the apparitions and all the things that were going on there. He whispered in my ear, he says, "Oh, this is all a bunch of malarkey. I don't buy any of this stuff." He says, "I don't buy any of this stuff." He wanted to get out of there. He thought he was wasting his time. And it wasn't until we said, "Well, why don't you go up and," Larry said, "Why don't you go up and take some pictures in the attic?" That's what triggered. That was the catalyst right there, when that camera got pulled out of his hands. There was nothing up there physical that did that, because we put a light up there. It was a 1,000 watt, what they call Coda light. It was omnidirectional. So we had to plug it in from down below with a stinger, extension cord. But I wanted light all over that attic before we went up there. I wanted to be able to see if there was anything physical that could have done there. Somebody hiding out. Wanted to rule out a hoax. There was nobody up there. Nobody. And what was amazing was when, after the camera got pulled out of his hands, he found the body of the camera lying on in an old crate on the other side, all the way on the other side of the attic. It's like a crate you see at a farmer's market, like they put peaches in or apples or something. And amazingly, the lens on the camera was it was a different place. It had taken the lens off, and it was positioned like porch side up, right behind where he was taking the pictures from. But it did this like in a blink of an eye. It was how fast it did it. It was really amazing. So that's what really triggered this whole thing. This is what started us into the Twilight Zone. It was just an amazing ride.
You recorded a light that entered Jackie's head.
Yes.
Did she feel anything when that was going on?
No, Buck, that was really interesting. That was taken, I think that was in July 1990. Now, that was at a third location. She left San Pedro after this other incident, we'll talk about in a minute, the most dramatic incident of the whole thing. She left San Pedro, went to Weldon. Then, after things started happening up there traumatically, as we'll talk about also, because that Jeff did go back up there. Jeff never went back to the house in San Pedro, never. But after this one other thing happened, but that was when she moved into an apartment at 640 West 7th Street. It's off of Gaffey Street, and it was an upper apartment, like up on the 5th floor or 4th floor, something like that. And I remember there was a psychic named Noni Fagat. I think somebody referred me to her. She was at that moment said that she didn't feel anything in the apartment. And my parents happened to be visiting. My stepfather and my mother were here visiting, and they were very interested in the ghost story. And they, as I say, my stepfather kind of set me up with the financing for the camera and all that kind of stuff that I got into the business with. And she told me, she was sitting with her back. There was a sliding glass door. She was sitting right next to the sliding glass door, as I recall, near that door. And she told me that she felt, I think she whispered in my ear earlier, she said, "I think there's something here." And so I, as I would normally do anyway, I started rolling on all of this. And I didn't see anything. She told me she did not feel anything at that point when it went into her head. I showed that to her later on. I think it really spooked her out. I didn't know I picked that up until we got back to, I had an editing bay set up in my apartment on the ground floor there. And my stepfather was there, my mom, and we were looking back on the footage, and lo and behold, we discovered those lights as we look back on the tapes, and I was blown away. You could tell they were some kind of little orbs or rods of light or something, and they were actually going into her head. That was a remarkable shot, I think.
Barry Taft wrote in his book that the situation is poltergeist in nature. Do you agree with that?
Well, if he means poltergeist in nature, it certainly had poltergeist elements to it. When I say that, meaning like the movement of objects
and the apporting.
Yeah, apports and then apports and then rapping sounds. Sometimes you hear noises, things of that nature. But I would disagree with the idea that this was something attached to Jackie. There's a theory, and I believe that it's possibly true in some cases, that they say that if I think this is what he's referring to, if a person has had some kind of maybe traumatic experience or maybe some emotional distress, that they're projecting, it's almost like a psychic lobotomy or something. It's being projected outward into the physical world. Like, let's say she had something traumatic happen to her. Maybe it could have been a childhood thing that happened to her with her parents or friends or something. And suddenly she gets to a certain age, maybe she's older, she has more energy or something. And she outwardly is projecting these things like psychokinetically.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is the case. I think that this is an example of a lady who moved into a house that was probably already haunted from the get-go. And somehow it could have been using her energy. It could have been using maybe all of our energies as we went in to investigate it. But I don't think that it is connected with her in that way, that she's doing some kind of psychic projection into the physical. The reason I say that now, it's been 35 years since she's not lived in that house, and that house is still haunted.
That's what Barry Taft alluded to in his book, and that the current owners still have issues.
Yeah, just recently, just a few months ago, I went down there. A friend of mine wanted me to sign a DVD for him. He's a guy that was really interested in the case, Eric Ramos, and he wanted to know where it happened, because you can't really see the house from the street. There's two bungalows that are twin. They're behind this other bigger house on 11th Street, and I said, "Oh, I agreed to come down." And Melody, my girlfriend, went with us, and a couple other people met us down there because they wanted to kind of see where it was. I think I pointed out, I know the owner, Jesse Segala. I don't know, maybe we could talk to him and see if there's anything going on. But just so happened, I think it was this past Father's Day. This is when we found out. We walked up. I showed Eric where it was, and I think Sheena Mello was there. Melody was there. Eric was there. And this couple came walking down the driveway. It's a long driveway. And since we did the haunting, the owner has a wooden gate there with there's a gate. It's like locked. So you have to have the thing to unlock it with. And this couple came with their two children. They were, I'd say, maybe early teenage age children. And I saw them going back there. And I said, oh my gosh. I said, do you guys live back there? And I said, 593, because that's the address. And he go, yeah. And so I said, go, I talk to you for a few minutes. And Jesse was there. Jesse okayed it. Jesse, the owner, he was in the front. And we went back, and luckily Melody had her video camera. She got a lot of this on video. And they were telling us stories about the house being haunted. They've lived there for some time now. They don't go in the attic. They heard all the stories, but they hear noises, heavy footsteps going across the attic, over the roof. I think things have moved. They've got EVPs that picked up on their phones, recordings and stuff. But it's still going on, but not to the degree that it went on when Jackie lived there. There's nothing harmful been done, at least to my knowledge. But it's still haunted. The place is still haunted. I was amazed. I blew my mind when I heard that. I had no idea.
Barry, do you still keep in touch with Jackie?
No, I don't hear from her too much. I do hear about what she's doing. She's really led more of a private life now. I think she kind of wants to get away from all of that. But Eric, a friend of mine who I met recently, he does keep in touch with her from time to time. So she's now has a nice job with her parents' accounting firm. And there's other people that were involved in the case. One lady, Susan Castaneda, was there the night of this incident we'll talk about in a second. She's since passed away. I'm not sure about Chrissy Zivkovic. I don't know what she was very religious. I don't know if that may be a reason why she doesn't want to talk about it. But I think that, as we were alluding to earlier, the most, I think, phenomenal incident that happened was on September 4th. Do you know what I'm alluding to? You probably know.
The liquid thing, the blood-like plasma stuff.
That was August 28th. That was just a few nights before. Now, on August 28th, there had been a group of people there that night. I think Tapp was there that night earlier. They had all left. There was just a small handful of us there. There was Bob Moss. I think Jeff was there, and maybe Chrissy. Susan was there, Susan Castaneda, Jackie. And this liquid ooze starts dripping out of the wall cabinets. Had a camera on my shoulder. I went and grabbed it as it happened. I believe there was some other stuff that came up out of the floorboards back in the hallway. It was a little darker, harder to see, but I remember that came out, and I recorded that on camera. And Taft took it to a lab, I think at UCLA, and it came out that it was human blood plasma with a heavy copper and iodine content. The iodine was intriguing to me because the first night that we walked into the house, we had there was a very distinct smell of iodine all near that laundry room just below where you crawl up into the attic where that was. But then, this is August 28th, 89. On September 4th, just a few days later or a week after that, the most amazing thing happened. I'm with Jeff and Gary. We were at my apartment in Studio City. Like I said, we did some corporate video work, stuff like that. And I think we were going through some tapes or something. Well, I was starting to record all the phone calls. And I told Jackie I'm going to record all this to keep a record of it. And she calls when we're all there. And it was like, I think we were working late. It was like 11:30 or something at night. And she said, all hell was breaking loose. And we have this phone call recorded. I think it's on the original documentary I did from years ago. And she's saying that all hell was breaking loose, that Pepsi can got hurled out of a refrigerator at her, and the doors were opening and closing, slamming shut. And she was hearing footsteps, all these different poltergeist types of things. So we were all together, and we said, let's go down there. And so we grabbed the camera equipment. I had freshly charged batteries, went down there, jumped in the van, went down there, and lo and behold, when we got in there, it was really quiet. It was very, I'd say transient. It was like just nothing like what she was describing. I remember filming an interview with her, and she had her two kids out on the front porch in like little bassinets or something. And she was afraid to even go in the house, but she did do the interview right inside the front door when she felt a little better with people being there, but it was quiet. And Jeff and Gary decided to go up in the attic. Jeff wanted to show Gary what had happened, where the camera got pulled, that kind of thing. And so he figured if somebody was with him, he'd be okay. And then Susan showed up. Susan was a friend of hers, a neighbor. As I said, Susan since has passed away. I think she had cancer a few years after that. She was a good friend of Jackie's at that time. Susan Castaneda, a neighbor. And I was down there with the camera on my shoulder, and it was quiet. I really at that point didn't think much was going to happen either. And they're up there walking around, and I remember this is important. Okay, Jeff had a flashlight. He didn't have he didn't have a camera with him. But I think Jeff went up first. Gary's going up. And I said to Gary, as he's going up, I said, look, if anything happens, let's get a picture or something. I don't think anything's going to happen. Let's get a picture. I handed him a little point and shoot camera. Because everybody said, how do you get these pictures? This is what I did. I gave him a point and shoot camera with a built-in flash. All you have to do is hit the button on it. It'll flash. And so they were up there for, I think, about, I want to say maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I'm standing below in this darkened little space, the laundry room area, and right across from there's Jackie and Susan. The first thing that happened to tip us off that there was something weird going on was a small orb of light, reddish in color or reddish orange, came across like that right in front of us, but it disappeared before I could get a shot of it, get the camera on. I was really trying to save battery, so I didn't have the camera on all the time. But back in those days, the camera would suck up the battery really quick. on those cameras. They were power batteries, but they would suck it up quick. So we saw this light, and so and we all like remarking, wow, what was that light? And I yelled up there, I said, hey, you guys got to come down. There's something going on down here. And so Gary and Jeff were back kind of the center of the attic. In the center part of that attic, they have these trusses up there that support the attic. You can walk upright in that part of the attic. So Gary leaves Jeff. That's critical. He left Jeff in the middle to find out what we were talking about. So he wanted to get closer to the crawl space opening. So as soon as he moved over there, I guess he was on his way over there. Okay, down below where me, Jackie, and Susan are. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, we hear this. Just three snaps, like finger snaps. Sound exactly like someone snapping their fingers. It was loud too. So I said, somebody's snapping down here. Something's going on. So as soon as Gary came over to see what was happening, something told me, turn the camera on. I just turned the camera on, the video camera. Just get that feeling. Because after the snapping sound, I thought, oh, there's something maybe closing in on us or something. And we hear there's like a groan. And if I had recorded, like hit the button a second later, I wouldn't have got that. So Gary turns. He can't really see Jeff because Jeff's flashlight went out and hit the floor. He takes one flash of the camera that I given him. He gets a wide shot of Jeff, and he gets a little closer. He's got a little closer shot. And it's hard to see in the picture, but you can definitely see where Jeff's legs are wrapped around a 2x4, like one of the trusses. As he got closer to him, I had put a light on the camera. I had a powerful camera light, 250-watt light with a battery belt strapped around me. So he's able to see more once I put that light on, and also the light that she had, the bulb light, on the right below the attic, illuminates that part. So he was able to see a little bit better. And as he got over there to him, he found Jeff hanging. He had been attacked by an invisible force that had taken an old weathered clothesline cord that we had never seen up there before. We had thoroughly checked that attic out before, like the first night was up there. Nothing like that I could see up there like that. And so he had to bend the nail down. It was twisted around the nail, and it's tied in a bowline knot, which is a seaman's knot. They use it traditionally, like longshoremen who work on docks and ships use that knot a lot. So a knot that doesn't slip. Because he was able to bend the nail down to get Jeff off of that. And we're down below not knowing what's really going on. And I kept rolling because I heard some scrabbling, like there's some movement. Next thing I know, I'm looking up, and if you've seen that footage at all, I had the light on. That's why it looks so clear. I had the light on the camera. He's coming down. He's still got this cord around his neck tied in that bowline knot. He's panic stricken. And of course, Gary's a pretty brave guy. He was always into science and all that stuff. I was surprised. He stayed up there and actually really tried to. He was brave. He stayed up there. He had the camera ready to see what else he could get. Once he knew that Jeff was okay, he comes down. And I interviewed Jeff right as he comes down. He said he didn't know what had happened. He just felt something hit him like that. And like, whoop, just that fast. That's how fast that entity was. But this was an actual case where a man almost died as a direct attack from an entity. And he could have if Gary had not been able to get him down. None of us knew what was going on down below till we saw it. I mean, I was just really blown away by it.
What did he see when he was up there? Did he see the rope thing?
No, I think, when I yelled up and Jackie and Susan, we were yelling up that we heard these snapping sounds. I think that he was sort of like wondering what's going on and in Gary Lee's. But I asked him many times, I interviewed him several years later to get that full interview, what he remembered. He says that he didn't see anything. He didn't feel anything really. It just happened like a bolt of lightning out of the blue hit him. It just that quick it happened. It shows you how quick and how powerful that this entity was. And boy, was it powerful, Buck, because that thing followed her all the way up to Weldon. And again, we had amazing incident up there. Now, people would say, well, why did Jeff go up there? Jeff went with me because I asked him to, but this is 5 months down the road. She had moved up there because then she calls me, says that things have followed her up there. Her neighbors called me, said they had seen an apparition. So I'm thinking, wow, maybe she was followed, but then I didn't know anything about ghosts at that time. I didn't know anything about ghosts following people, attaching and following, but they can. And Jeff found out in a big way. Again, he did not ever go back into the San Pedro house because who would, after somebody hanged you, right? But up there, this is in April. Believe it or not, we got up there on Friday the 13th, April 13th, 1990. We got there kind of late. I told her we'd be up there, but we got up there kind of late. We didn't know exactly how far that drive was. It was up there. It was way up there. It's on a dirt road called Chucker Street. And right away, Jeff saw a shadow in a storage shed behind that it was a mobile home. And I remember we interviewed a fellow by the name of James Silcott. And we interviewed him. We interviewed he and his wife the next day. But that night, he set up one of his like camcorders, he had a deck hooked up to a camcorder shooting VHS at that time. And he just had pointed it into the storage shed. We were inside doing the interview, and Jeff happened to notice outside that the camera had moved. He said, "Oh, I think the camera moved." So we went out and found out that the camera moved, but he had it rolling, but it didn't record anything. It didn't knock the camera out. It just saw noise, just signal noise. That's it. And then we interviewed some people. Then here's the thing that blew my mind. Now, I never had any experiences with Ouija boards except my mother when that farm I grew up in Ohio, I remember her playing with a Ouija board with some of her friends. They do it just like a party thing, just having fun. And I remember some of the people back when I was a kid, they were like oohing and ahhing. You're like, wow, look at that. Like I don't remember what messages they were giving or anything. Like there was nothing paranormal that happened, but they were getting some interesting messages. That's my only experience with that. But she said that a neighbor had given her a Ouija board to find out what it was that was haunting her in San Pedro. And maybe now up there, since she was reporting seeing shadow figures and things up there now. So what happened is that we just I guess this was a big mistake. We decided to try to do the Ouija board ourselves, just Jeff and I. There were two witnesses. There was Jackie sitting to our left. We were at a table in the kitchen. There was a lady named Tina Lawler. She's still around. She lives in Bakersfield. Every now and then I hear from her on Facebook. She's a really nice person, and she's a witness to it. Here's the thing. Do you remember earlier on the first night that I went up into the attic in San Pedro, it neutralized my camera. It stopped it. But then when I came down, it started it up again. Well, I had that same camera, and I had it set up on a tripod. I was recording, trying to document everything I could. That was just what I did. And I had it set up, and the same thing happened. No power. I had AC, plugged it in to the wall. Nothing. Batteries. I had a whole bag of batteries, fully charged. Nothing. Didn't work until the next morning. It came on. The light came on, the pilot light. But this was the most amazing night in my career as far as seeing anything physical, because right away the room got freezing cold. She had candles there. The candles would go out one by one. It was giving us all these different cryptic messages like, I am doomed to wander. I am truly lost. And we said this, are you telling us that you really are a ghost? Are you're here all around us? And it said something like, phantoms fill the skies around you, which I thought was interesting because we were picking up orbs of light. I picked up orbs of light the night that Jeff got hanged. If you see the footage of Jeff when he comes down from the attic, crawl space, thank God he was okay. And I'm rolling camera. If you look in the doorway behind, you'll see a little orb of light shoot across with a tail. And later on, he's in the living room trying to explain to Jeff or Gary. And I've got a shot of Gary on camera, and I have a very powerful light on, which casts no shadow as this object come across over his head and casts no shadow on the back wall, even despite the powerful light that I had on. Well, the incident with the Ouija board wasn't something like where a lot of ghosts like hide out and they're very surreptitious what they do, very sneaky. this was something like right in front of it. It was flaunting itself, its power, because what it did was it said something about, I can't recall the whole conversation, but I have a document in my book because she wrote down everything it said. At least we have a writing of all this, and it actually said something about hatred. It was full of hate, and I made a big mistake. I said, is anyone here that you hate? And again, when we were asking questions all along, but this table was vibrating. It wouldn't vibrate the whole time. It would vibrate in spurts, and then it would lift up and down like this. And then Tina's looking underneath the table. She saw that it wasn't our legs, our knees doing it. And when I asked it, is there anyone here you hate? Jeff is sitting right across from me. He picks up, he levitates into the air, and this is quick. And he gets thrown into where the wall meets the ceiling. It was like hit by a lightning bolt, and he was knocked out for about a minute or so. And they all screamed, ran out of the house. And that was a singular moment for me, as far as seeing something physical happen right in front of me. And I remember Tina let out this really real loud shriek of terror. I'll never forget that. Boom! He's out the door. Jackie wanted to go get her kids out of the house. I'm trying to pick Jeff up off of the floor, get his head up off of the floor, and he was okay. I had a point and shoot camera. I got one shot when he kind of recovered. I got him out of the house. But that night changed my life forever, because I've never seen anything like that to happen right in front of you in such an ostentatious display of supernatural power like that.
Did Jackie's situation ever come to an end?
Yeah, Buck, it started fizzling out, I think, within a couple of years after 89, 90. It could be that it somehow was attached to her in a way that it could extract energy from her, maybe, to manifest. She, at first, was very afraid to document. I said, look, I want to get documentation. And so I made sure she had a point and shoot camera. And the first two pictures she got or 2 or 3 pictures down in San Pedro house in the kitchen, she got these lights that were splitting apart near the ceiling. And it was witnessed by Chrissy Zivkovic. And then in the apartment at 640 West 7th Street, she got these amazing balls of light that are bright, like a trio of glowing spheres hovering over the carpet. They're emitting light down onto the carpet themselves. And she got a couple other pictures like that. I just said, look, it's so important that we get data, that we get evidence. That was my whole focus. So glad we did. So glad she was able to do that.
In California's Most Haunted, a doc of yours, in one of the segments, you tackled the Door Spider, the Entity case, which you previously spoke about. That segment is also featured on the Entity DVD. Were you able to get a hold of any of Door Spider's children when you were doing that?
No, I did not. I didn't really, at the time I did that, that was around 2003. I think I released that. It originally aired on Sci-Fi Channel, as well as Unknown Encounter did. And I never did. I don't even think Taft knew where they were at that time. I think since then, some more information's come out. I believe he did an interview with somebody, one of her sons. The only person besides Taft that was there that I've spoken with, well, I did a radio show once with Kerry Gaynor, but we didn't really talk about that. He came out on the San Pedro thing once when she had moved, but we were just doing a radio show. I did meet with, I interviewed Frank De Felita and Mort Zarkov. Frank was the guy who wrote the book and witnessed phenomena at the original Byther home. Mort Zarkov was a television screenplay writer and also taught at UCLA screenplay writing. He was a really nice guy. He had witnessed the light manifestations in Door Spider's bedroom. And I also, I was in that same show. I interviewed Dick Thompson, and I believe Dick Thompson also appeared in Unknown Encounter because he examined the photographs that Jackie had taken. Dick is the guy, I'm sure Dick is probably passed on by now, but Dick took the photographs. He and his wife had a place called Brentwood Photoshop. He had taken the pictures of the arcing lights above Jackie's head as she was sitting on the bed. So he's a really good camera expert, as well as Alan Wieters spoke about some of the lights that Jackie had taken, of the lights hovering over the floor in the baby's bedroom that are emitting the light onto the floor. So Melody and I have talked quite a few times about what our thinking is on this. In most cases of hauntings or even poltergeist cases, for whatever reason, we think that they display orbs of light or rods of light. We picked up a lot of rods and orbs here. We get visited here almost several times a week outside by the swimming pool. She has cameras. You can watch them in motion, moving around. And we've recorded so many of them. It's just amazing.
Day and night.
Yeah, day and night. Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah, it's part and parcel to the haunting. These lights have an integral part of the haunting. And actually, the case I did, Buck, I'm just about finished with this show I shot 10 years ago. I finally got around to editing it finally. It's a great story. It's similar to Melody's case. There's a lady named Kimberly Reitzman Lightfeld. She's out in Apple Valley. She's still alive. She's still suffering from an entity attachment. And we went out there, 3 or 4 nights. I was able to get them to set up a night vision camera in the bedroom as they slept. And it wasn't as pronounced as like the stuff that Melody's getting. And maybe not, obviously not as pronounced as the San Pedro case, but we did get rods of light moving over the bed at night. And there's some that are bright orbs of light. You can see them moving down along the wall across picture frames. But it was sneaky. There's a manifestation of a black shadow figure that appears in the doorway to the master bedroom, and it would come and attack her. Even though her husband was asleep, it would still attack her. And he didn't even know what was going on. That's how sneaky this stuff can be, and powerful.
I want to talk about your doc, Monsters of the UFO.
Yeah.
About the Kelly Hopkinsville extraterrestrial encounter from 1955.
Yeah, I did several of those. I did one in West Virginia called the Flatwoods Monster, Legend of the Flatwoods Monster. And I did the Kelly Green Man. That was about 22 years ago that I shot those. In fact, I just shipped, first time someone found out about it, there's a place called the Flatwoods Monster Museum. It's in a place called Sutton, West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And they wanted DVDs now finally for their museum. I don't know. I'm not a good promoter, I guess, but they found out about it and I shipped a bunch of DVDs. I don't know if people watch them yet, but it's good to have, because I had on that one, I had gone back and interviewed some of the people that were still alive. Now with the Kelly Greenman, you were asking about that. That's an amazing case. I'm going to go back to make another appearance next October. I was asked to go back and give a talk there. They're going to show the film again. And we recreated that. But I did get a few interviews. I got an interview with Lucky Sutton's son, Elmer. And really blew my mind. My former girlfriend, Lisa, who unfortunately passed away of cancer years ago, she helped me out with all those shows. And we were back there trying to get what we could. We were getting whatever interviews, because this was in 55, where a family of just a good family of farmers. I guess they lived in a very rural area, a place called Kelly. It's outside of Hopkinsville. They claimed that on August 21st, 55, that one of the gentlemen, his name was Billy Ray Taylor, went to a well just right at sundown. And he saw a bright light in the sky coming down. It looked like it landed behind the farm. And of course, I guess when they looked out, they didn't see anything. But then after it got dark, these creatures came up to the farmhouse. And of course, the family was terrified. They didn't know what they were dealing with. And they got out the shooting irons. and I can imagine they were just terrified, but looked like they were small, diminutive kind of creatures with large ears and goblin-like, I should say. And they started shooting it, but the bullets had no effect. The bullets had no effect on the creature. But there was several of them. I forgot how many. But when we went back to do the trying to get interviews, I was trying to find out, is there anybody still alive that was actually in the house? And I don't know if you saw that documentary, but there was one guy we found out that was still alive. Somebody tipped me off. I can't think of the guy's name now. He says, "Oh, there's a guy, O.P. Baker. He was in that house." And I thought, wow. So I tried to call him. I got his number, but I don't think he could understand me because it's kind of hard to hear him. So the guy told me where he lived. I thought, let's just take a chance, because I think we had to get on a plane, go back to LA the next day. And we drove up to where he lived, and I saw this gentleman standing outside. He just looked like he had the bib overalls. He looked like an old farmer type. I thought, wow, looked like a nice guy. And I walked up to him and said, are you Opie Baker? And he goes, yeah, I'm him. He actually gave us like a 10-minute interview. I mean, he was very hard of hearing, but he was able to testify that he was in that house that night.
Was it difficult to find people who were involved?
Yeah.
I mean, there were 11 people there.
Yeah, exactly. There was one other guy. It was hard because most of the adults had passed on. But there was one guy, Lonnie Langford, I believe his name was. He was a kid in the house. And I don't know if Lonnie is still alive today. I have been out of touch with him, but I shot this interview with him 20 years ago. He may still be around. I don't know. He'd be up in years, but he was a super nice guy. I really enjoyed meeting him. He gave me an interview. He was a child then. And when we did the recreation out here, we tried to simulate kind of what that feeling was like, that whole thing, the terror. And I guess the dogs were going crazy. And I guess that the creatures eventually left. Then they piled into these vehicles, and they went into the police station. Police came out, and they didn't see anything, but they saw the bullet holes everywhere. And then apparently there was a story that when the police left, not maybe a few hours later, that some of the creatures came back, was looking in the windows again, but then again disappeared. And I believe that Lucky Sutton shot at another one through the window. And Glennie Langford, who was the matriarch of that family, was sitting right there when he was doing a shot. But yeah, you're right. It's hard to find these people that would still be living today because of it happened so many years ago. But I was lucky to get what I did get. And Elmer, the son, was a very great guy. I know his daughter. I've spoken with his daughter. I wasn't able to get an interview with her at the time, but she's spoken with me, through Facebook and social media and stuff. And she's the one that wants me to come back and show the film again next year and talk about it. So it's a fascinating story.
Has anyone spotted similar extraterrestrials like that with big ears and who are short stature?
I don't know of any other cases that I can think of like that. It's almost like they look like goblins or something, but they have like sinewy little bodies, thin little bodies, like long arms and talon-like hands or like webbed hands. It's very unusual. And I wonder if it's not something, it wouldn't necessarily have to be something extraterrestrial. I always thought, well, maybe there's something interdimensional that crosses over occasionally. Even maybe some of the UFOs today that the Air Force people are saying it could be interdimensional, evidence of an interdimensional reality. There could be all sorts of things in other dimensions or part of that whole other realm. I think I don't rule anything out, because you can go back and look at different things like banshees. There's so many people have said they've seen banshees, and some people say, oh, that's just a legend. But there's so many real people in Ireland that say that's an omen of death. If you're a screaming banshee, a woman outside your window, it's a notification of an impending doom in that family. There's so many facets to this. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't know on that.
20 years ago, you shot a documentary on the OG Mothman from Point Pleasant. Mothman, man, myth, or monster? Any chance of that getting released anytime soon?
Yeah, you're good. I have, Melanie are always talking about, that's the only one that I never released. And I am planning to release that. It needs a little, when we did this film back 20 years ago, I used like a puppet model and things. And I think it needs a little extra work, and we're going to need to do that. But I have interviews with not all, but a lot of the original witnesses. And I went back there several times it's a place called Point Pleasant, West Virginia. I love that town. And they just erected a big stainless steel statue of the place, of the monster. I interviewed at her home a lady named Linda Scarberry, and I interviewed a lady named Marcella Bennett. And Marcella was in the very first, her husband, is that Jeff Wamsley's book?
Yeah.
I interviewed Jeff and Donnie Surgeon. They were great guys, and I think they still have something to do with the festival that goes on there.
I think Jeff is over the museum.
Yeah. I love those guys, and they were very helpful. And he was instrumental in getting me those interviews 22 years ago with Linda Scarberry and Marcella Bennett. And I know both of them have passed away now, but I have all of her original interview at her home. And the Marcella, I believe we interviewed her at a hotel. They were very nice. She had Marcella, rather, she had, I mean, a tremendously scary encounter with it, because you could tell she almost teared up during the interview. It frightened her to death. I believe she was sort of like paralyzed by it or something. They were going over to some friends in a wooded area, and they call it the TNT area because they used to make dynamite in that area. They have these old igloos still there, I think, in some places. And I believe that she encountered it standing in front of her. Two of the people she's with walked up to the house with her friend, and she got out. And next thing you know, this thing was there, and she like passed out. I guess it was standing over her. Then it went up to the windows as she ran into the house. Someone got her. The thing wasn't there at that point, but then later on, they went into the house, and it was looking in through the windows at them. She was absolutely terrified. They were very, very convincing people. There's no doubt in my mind that something happened. And that's a really great story. Yes, I am going to release that because it's got some really rare interviews with people that were in among the first witnesses. So that story is a very scary one. I think another reason, I don't know if I had mentioned this in an article or in the past, I think another reason I never released it, and you're one of the few people I've told. I don't think I've told that many people. When Lisa and I went back and we were doing interviews with Linda Scarberry, Marcella Bennett, we did Jeff Wamsley, Donnie Surgeon, and maybe some other people. But when we were back there working on it, we were out in the TNT area, in the general area where they had that, where they first encountered it by the old power plant. They said they saw it by the old power plant, and then it started following them. It became this car chase, you know. Lisa, when we got back to the hotel, we got back that night. Obviously, we woke up the next morning. She started having headaches, got very ill, and she came back here, and it got worse. And it turned out she had multiple myeloma cancer, and she died within the next year or two after that happened. So it always kind of spooked me a little bit, because you heard about, like, could it be like some kind of a death warning, sort of like a banshee type of a thing, or what? I think that was the reason I never released it at the time, but it's still there. I did do a cut of it. It just needs a little extra work, and I definitely will release that though. Now it's been so many years, I will definitely release that.
I had West Virginia filmmaker Calvin Grimm on last year, and he shot a movie on Mothman, fictional. He said people in Point Pleasant are still sore over the Silver Bridge situation, which has been tied to Mothman. Most of the people there believe that something happened, but the whole Silver Bridge thing is still in the older people's minds sketched, since many of those people lost family members on the bridge.
Yeah, there was it is really tragic what happened. So many people died into that. They fell into that icy cold water. It was right around Christmas season. They found Christmas packages in the water, and little children died in that thing. It was just absolutely horrendous. And I think at least for a time, I don't know about how many years, for a time, it's interesting that after that event happened, the Mothman seemed like it went away for a while. And I don't know, I think I've heard that there's been other sightings since then. But there was a story, or it could have been a rumor, that he was sighted up on the upper spire of the Silver Bridge by two truckers on the night before the bridge collapsed. I thought that was interesting. If that's true, that was very interesting. The other thing that I find interesting about the Mothman, I'm going back in my memory banks here, that I found interesting that you don't hear a lot about, at least in my mind, is that when the Mothman sightings were happening, there was a plethora of UFO sightings all up and down the Ohio River. There were Men in Black sightings, and I think I know Linda Scarberry said that she saw a man in black in her baby's bedroom or something one night, and he disappeared or something. I forget the whole story, but there's a lot of other people that said they had men in black encounters, and who they are, I don't know.
I read that in Jeff Wamsley's book, and that was creepy.
Yeah.
A lot of people in West Virginia look at that as a myth, but when I read that book, Mothman Behind the Red Eyes, and read all those testimonies, something happened. And I don't think that something was from this world.
Because I think over, from what I remember, I think Jeff Wamsley reported, and it's been documented, I believe over 100 people saw the creature itself in different stages of the sightings. It went along. I guess that car chase thing was the one of the standout things that happened, because the fact that there were 4 people in the car. It was Roger Wamsley. I'm sorry, not Wamsley. I mean, thinking Roger Scarberry. Roger Scarberry was Linda's husband at the time, and I can't think of the other couple, but there was another couple that saw it, and they think it saw it on the road near the TNT Center, the old power plant. But there's too many sightings of something of high strangeness to have been a figment of the imagination. Too many sightings. Again, lots of UFO sightings, and I think it's got some connection. I don't know what. Again, that UFO connection, bringing forth a creature of that kind of magnitude or bizarreness, could be, again, interdimensional, not necessarily extraterrestrial. Could be something interdimensional.
There was another sighting in 2016 in Point Pleasant.
Wow, I did not know that.
And there's been recent sightings at the O'Hare Airport in Chicago.
I did hear something about the O'Hare Airport. They had a sighting there, and I thought that was very, very unusual, because of the fact that so much of it has subsided after the Silver Bridge collapse. I think that the Silver Bridge collapse, I mean, it could have been like what it was, a faulty eye bolt or something like that. They tried to blame it on. I mean, that may have something to do with it, obviously, but it is interesting the coincidental nature that the phenomena kind of ceased for a good period of time after the bridge collapse. It's really bizarre.
You co-created My Ghost Story. How did that series come about?
That series came about. There was a producer that had called me in, named Shepard, Mark Shepard. He had called me in. I believe it's the name, Mark Shepard. I might be wrong in the name. It's been so many years ago. But a producer called me in to. Well, he knew I had done the San Pedro case, and he told me about an idea of doing real ghost stories and getting the real people involved. And so we did do that. And so we shot most of the interviews in a studio. We did it with some interesting lighting, and we had like the lights moving behind them. But the fun part for me, it was great. I mean, believe me, it was great to hear these stories. The fun part for me was to be able to travel. I went out after we got a lot of these interviews. I went out on the road and shot what we call the B-roll. And the B-roll, if you do, you can have an interview. But if you have a talking head that runs too long, it gets boring, And so you want to get the shots. Like I went to the Sally house in Atchison, Kansas, and but I only got to spend one night there. And that was after the Deborah and Tony Pickman had already moved out of the house.
Was activity still happening by that point?
No, it wasn't. There had been people that had gone into the house and said they'd had some experiences. We were only there one night for a few hours. I was with a friend of mine, Dan Bell. He was my audio guy at the time. It was a very quiet night that we went in. The only thing that happened at all was we were in the backyard, and he said that an object moved, like a rock or something moved in the grass or something, some object. But it was very quick, so we weren't sure if that was paranormal or not. But I did meet with Deborah and Tony. I met Deborah and Tony Pickman in Hollywood at the studio, and she stays in touch with me a little bit off and on Facebook. She's a very nice lady. They're very, very solid people. The thing I think that really got national attention, there was a friend of mine who I knew that went out with a show called Sightings. He was a psychic named Peter.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah, I knew Peter. Unfortunately, Peter's gone too. He died of cancer about 15 years ago. He's a great guy. And he went out there, and when Sightings took a camera team out there, even with the producer, I forget the guy's name. He was the guy that hosted the show. Tim White. Tim White's the name. Now I remember his name. They went out there, and Tony was being her husband had been particularly affected by it. And right when they were, I think, right when they were doing an interview with him, so they had the lights on him so they could record it. He started feeling something under his shirt, and he opened up his shirt, and there, I think, scratch marks appeared right in front of the camera, which is a rarity, you know, to get that. That was very unusual. And where Peter James, as you know, he went out there and had some interesting information. And there was another time that I went to a house. Are you familiar with the Polaroid ghost story? It's out here near where I live. It's in the right here near Glendale. And there's a I believe Sightings did it too at that time. There's a guy named John Huckert and John Matkowski. They were living there, and they started getting Polaroid shots of ghosts. They would show up on their Polaroid their cameras, and they could ask questions, and it would write answers in Latin. Eventually did write English as well. But we are the night spirits of the dead. I forget what that would be in Latin, but it would write different answers to their question. But they would take a picture. And I went to a Halloween party there with Peter was there, and I had a camera. I got some of this on camera. I think Taft might have been there that night too. And things happened right when we were there. They would ask questions, take a picture, Polaroid picture, and it would show up on the Polaroid shot. And a lot of times we give an answer in Latin or English, but I know it did Latin as well. So it was really, really bizarre.
Was Peter James legit? You hear about all these different mediums out there that claim to have all these extrasensory communication powers. Was he like 100% for real?
Well, I don't know. I don't know about 100%. It's hard to say. I don't know about most people being 100% real, but I think he was legit. I think he tried. I think he was honestly, and he gave a real effort on trying to get information. And a lot of the stuff that he came out with, names and dates and things, sometimes proved accurate. You know, think of the Queen Mary, who would come up with names and different things like that of people who had died in the area. So, but as far as 100% accurate, I don't know any psychic that is 100% accurate.
Yeah, I've seen him on Unsolved Mysteries sightings over the years, and I was just curious. In your work, did you ever run into Dr. William Roll?
Oh, Bill Roll. No, William Roll. No, I did not. I would have liked to have met Bill Roll, but I did not. I heard he was a very good researcher. He did I think he was he on the East Coast? I believe maybe on the East Coast somewhere. I'm not sure, but
I think he was in Georgia.
Was it Georgia?
I believe.
Really interesting guy. I believe he wrote a few books too as well. I'm not sure. I think he wrote something, but William Roll, no, I did not. I think Barry Taft might have met him. I did not.
So what was your favorite episode of My Ghost Story?
Oh, let me think. My Ghost Story, my favorite episode. Well, yeah, obviously they did the San Pedro case, so I could relate to that one. It was a natural for them, but I had access to the people. There was a place I remember went to a place called in Eureka, I believe it was Eureka, Arkansas. And there was an old hotel that was haunted there. And I forget the name of the hotel. It might have been Crescent Hotel, something like that. I can't remember the name of it. We're going back a few years. But I remember in the basement at a certain period of time, there might have been an epidemic or something, or, a bad flu epidemic. I'm not sure what it was, but they had a morgue in that hotel in the basement. And you could go in parts of that basement, and you could still see where they used to drain the blood of the bodies and all that. And people were telling me that it was really haunted. And there was a gentleman that they hired for me to help me out to do production assistant back there. And his name was Ron Allman, I believe. Really nice guy. He was a skeptic, though. And we went down into the area where they used to conduct autopsies. And while we were there, I mean, we did interviews with people and all that kind of stuff and got other B-roll. But while we were there was like this template. It's hard to describe. It's like a long, narrow template that was hanging from a nail. They must have used it to measure something for woodworking or something. It was hanging off of a nail. And on the side of where they used to keep the refrigeration, the old refrigeration unit, where they used to store the bodies, well, there's no wind, no air circulation down there, nothing. But it was cold in there, but there's no current of air or anything moving. That thing started like a pendulum, started swinging back and forth, and it just kept going and going and going. I have all that on camera. I thought that was interesting. It's always interesting when something happens right in front of you and you're able to document it. But that was a really cool place to go. That was stand out. It was in Eureka, Arkansas. Never forget it.
What has been the creepiest investigation of the things that go bump in the night that you've ever worked on?
Well, I think besides the San Pedro case, that obviously is a high point. There was a case that I worked on just a number of years, not too long ago. Is in 2018. Is in Virginia City, Nevada. The old silver mining town is a big tourist spot. I used to go up there and give a talk to the Paracon people up there. Doug Carnahan used to bring me up as a guest speaker. I must have did it for 10 years straight. And Doug, unfortunately, he's passed on since then that we did this investigation. He was telling me about, well, he called me one day. He says, you know what, we've got a lot of things going on. You need to, if you can bring a little camera crew up. And I said, well, I can run camera. I can bring a little team of people come up and we'll see what we get. It's a place called the Bonanza Saloon. Before that, it was something else way back. I can't think what it was. Big Bonanza Market or something. But before that, I don't know what. But it goes way back. It was at least maybe 120 years old. But people were experiencing attacks, physical attacks in the basement of this old saloon. So I went up there. I had a friend of mine, Bobby Bennett, who I just saw recently. Bobby, another good friend of mine, he was Michael J. Fox's stand-in. If you ever see any of the Back to the Future movies, I was just working with him out there. They had like a reunion with some of the people that worked on those up in a place called Sonora. They did, if you saw the third Back to the Future movie, the Wild West one, the Western, that's where they shot it, Sonora. And so he had a big thing. So I just saw him recently. It was a lot of fun. But he came up with me, a guy named Tom Myrtle. Tom's up in Washington State now. He moved back up there. And it was us three, and we had a couple cameras. We brought some wireless audio equipment up. And so we got together with Doug. Doug brought in two great people, Ella McFarland, and there was one other lady. I just can't think of her name right offhand, but Devin Zisk was the male investigator. And it'll probably come to me. But there were two psychics. Two female psychics. They were sitting back to back, and they were in this little storage room in the basement. And the other guys, like Devin, Doug, and this other gentleman, they were up at the bar. Now the place, there were they weren't serving drinks or anything. It was closed, but we were in there in the middle of the night. They were just looking at what was going on from below with the FaceTime thing going on from the iPhone down below. And I had positioned Tom down there with a lockdown tripod camera, and I had Bobby with a handheld Canon camera shooting video. And I was up there with the guys that they were watching the phone, and there was a black mist that forms over the group. You got the two psychics sitting back to back. They're trying to connect with something. But the first night we went in there, nothing happened. The first night, nothing happened. We didn't do that sit-down thing in that storage room the first night. First night, we went all through the place. It was boring. Nothing happened. The second night, different. That's when we did what I was just talking about, the part where they are sitting in the little storage room back to back. And, they're up there. They're down there. And then, like I say, I got a couple cameras down there, and I'm up by the bar area filming Doug and a couple of his team members. And then, like I say, this black mist starts to form, and you can see it misting over. I was able to catch that off of just filming in 4K right off of the phone. And later on, one of the other gentlemen went down to check things out, and some force, I have this on camera, he doesn't levitate, he gets thrown back into the wall, and he goes, his name was, I'm sorry, it was Jay and Marie Yates. That's the name. Jay Yates, and his wife was the other psychic. It just came to me, the name. And so Jay goes back upstairs and tells the other guy, oh, man, this thing just threw me against the wall. And they were down there. They kept, the psychics were back to back. They're still doing their thing, trying to communicate. And you can see, again, we're talking about rods and lights, orbs. They're all over the place. Tom's camera is picking them up everywhere. And at one point, you hear this loud bang, bang, bang. And the two psychics, well, the two psychics are back to back. Ellen passes out like something ready to take her over. She passes out. She slumps like this over. And meanwhile, papers start moving around inside of a box. And Bobby Bennett, the guy worked on Back to the Future, he was able to grab that with the handheld camera I gave him. So we got that on camera. That is part of, it's the second episode of a second Case Files Unknown that will be streaming soon. I've got a lot of shows that I've done a while back that are just now starting to stream, but that'll be coming out. It's all done. It's out there. And there's another really interesting story. It's not really a ghost story on that same thing. We interviewed a lady, wrote a book called The Boy Who Knew Too Much. And it's about a little boy who seemed to have the memories of Lou Gehrig, the famous Yankee baseball star from the 30s and 40s. So it's another story, but the ghost story would be the Virginia Sim. That was a very scary one because you asked me what was really intense. I think that was one of the more intense things because, you know, we didn't know if she was alive or dead at that point when she slumped forward. It was really scary, but she recovered, fortunately, and very emotional time. But again, those lights, they're all over the place. They're all over the place. So that's, again, part and parcel to the haunting.
You, Dr. Barry Taft, and Dr. Andrew Nichols were nearly the cast for Ghost Hunters.
You know, I didn't know that. I've heard that, but I didn't know that for sure. I didn't know.
Barry Taft told the people over at the Pat and Brian show a few years back that, but he said the executive producer of Ghost Hunters, Mark Phillips, wanted to potentially fabricate stuff since Barry Taft told him it's very rare for something to happen on the first investigation.
Right. You know what? Yeah, Mark Phillips, that's the guy that brought me in to co-create my ghost story, but he was not I didn't know at the time, but as I found out a little later on, he was not a reputable person. Now what I brought him were real stories, and now as far as him recreating anything, I don't think they recreated too much during that show because what we were doing, we were bringing in real people who had experiences, and I would go out and just if they had a house, I'd get the house, but usually nothing was going on. Only that Eureka, Arkansas thing that was the thing that I saw that I caught. But yeah, he was not. We had a falling out later. He was not a reputable person. I could see him doing that. I could see Mark Phillips doing something like that. But if he had approached me with something like, "Oh, I want you to fabricate something," no, I would never have never fabricated anything. Never. He may have told Jeff that. I didn't know. Yeah, I can believe him asking somebody to do that. Yeah.
I had Barry Taft on 2 years ago, and he told me about the interactions with Zach Bagans on Ghost Adventures and Demon House, and you're seeing more and more of this stuff being portrayed as if it's real. But when it comes to these ghost shows, how much is fact and fiction?
Yeah, you make a good point, Buck. You know, you make a good point. And Melody and I talk about this all the time. I've never worked with Zach Bagan. I can't really say anything. I don't know. I know that there have been other shows out there where it just seems like it's almost over the top in some cases, almost like they're acting it. And sometimes I can tell when it's artificial just from knowing a lot of actors out here. And I think that you really have to watch these shows and take a lot of them with a grain of salt, because I know there's a lot of really good researchers out there that want to come out with the truth. I want to come out with the truth. And that's what I always try to present and try to capture things with the camera. It's been my whole impetus, you know, my whole thing. And but I think you have to be wary. And the other thing I was going to mention too, if you look up, here's the thing I noticed. I told Melanie the other day. You look up on, let's say, the San Pedro Haunting, you'll find all these different websites or podcasts, you know, like, not yours, obviously, but I'm saying that different, they'll tell you the story and they'll just talk about it on the camera. They'll just, one guy's talking, maybe they might show a few pictures from my case or something. Usually they're from my documentary or something. Most of the time, they're fairly accurate. But like there was one I was just watching the other day. I can't think of the name of it, but it was watching it the other day, and they were saying that they talked all about the Jackie Hernandez story and that ghost in the attic and the hanging, and then it says, and then the ghost hunters never came back ever, and then everybody's saying, oh yeah, they weren't really ghost hunters, they were chicken, blah blah blah. Well, that's not true. Now Jeff never went back to the house. I wouldn't blame him for not going back because it hanged him, right? But then they don't look at all of the other. I wrote a book on that, I wrote a whole book on that story. They don't do their homework. They don't do their homework because to say that, they didn't obviously do their homework, because I went back many times after the hanging incident, and Gary Bain went back with me, and we were checking. We got other things, bullets of light going across the attic and things when he went up. There wasn't a whole lot that happened after the hanging, but we went back a number of times. And then when Jackie moved, of course, Jeff did go back up for me, but they didn't even mention that fact that she had moved, and then it followed the researchers. They didn't mention any of that. So right away, people jump to conclusions, and they make these faulty statements, on these different podcasts. And I say some of them, though, I will give credit. Some of them are more thorough. I say you got to be a journalist. You have to be a journalist. You have to examine all facets of the story before you do these things and just like fluff it off or say, oh no, everybody never went back to the house. It's just a faulty statement, So you have to watch. But yeah, there's a lot of people, I think, that fake stuff out there. But there is a lot of truth out there as well.
Now is the time for 5 questions. Favorite haunted location to visit?
My favorite haunted location to visit. Not that I had any experience when I visited there, but I went there to do a talk about 12 years ago. So I think Barry Camp was there too. Was Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where they had the great Civil War battle.
Sightings or unsolved mysteries?
I like unsolved mysteries. I mean, I like sightings. I do like sightings because they did show a lot of real stuff, but there was something about that Robert Stack. Robert Stack was the host of Unsolved Mysteries. I like the way he presented the story for some reason.
The Legend of Boggy Creek or the UFO incident?
Oh, wow. They're both good. That's a hard one. I like the Legend of Boggy Creek, and I like the UFO incident. It's really hard to say. What I liked about Boggy Creek, it was done on a low budget. There was something raw about it. You know what I mean? It almost like it was really happening, because you could tell he wasn't really using like professional actors. He used really common people that were somebody like your next door neighbor, but they did a good enough job. It gave it a more air of credibility, I thought. And I like the fact he looked like he used like a lot of the real locations too. I love that film.
Elvira or Joe Bob Briggs?
Oh wow! I guess I don't know Joe Bob Briggs too much. I mean, I've seen Elvira. I think she did a good shtick with her thing, and I remember she was fun because she does it in kind of a sexy way, but she's not over the top. Well, she is a little over the top, but she's fun.
DVDs or streaming?
I like streaming from the standpoint. It's pro and con. I like streaming from the standpoint that you can, like, Melanie, I can go watch almost anything on YouTube. You can always find a subject that you're interested in and find it streaming that way, or go to Tubi. By the way, my original shows are on Tubi right now. What's that? Unknown Encounter, the San Pedro case, and the California Most Haunted. There's going to be more to come. But you know what? There's something about DVDs. It seems like a lost art now, because what I do like about DVDs, there's something to be said for that, because like on the DVD, I was able to put like an extra disc on the Flatwoods story, for instance. So you've got extra stuff you might not normally see. And I like collecting. I guess that's the word. I like collecting stuff. But I can we still like, we're caught up in that streaming world now, though. I do like the idea you can instantly see something too. So, but I do like collecting as well. It's hard toss up there.
I want to thank my special guest, Barry Conrad, for coming on Mothman in the Bible Belt to discuss his ghost hunting career and life in the entertainment industry. What he does takes balls, and personally, I'd be scared shitless. For Mothman in the Bible Belt podcast outlet updates, guest bios, episode breakdowns, and links to social media, please check us out on the web at www.mothmaninthebiblebelt.com. Thanks for listening.